Well, this is my vlog for March 6th, 2018, and I just happened to have PBS on. Watch the news sometimes on PBS and noticed that there was a special about Mr. Rogers on called "It's You I Like." It's you I like, and I don't remember what I was going to talk about today. I was going to talk about how sunny it is. I was going to talk about how it was going to be 60 degrees this weekend and how I was going to wear shorts. And I woke up with a sore throat and I've felt like I've had a little bit of a cold all day. And the arthritis in my back has been hurting because the temperature was very cold in the morning, although it got better as it got warmer. But now all I can think about is Mr. Rogers. And saying that I grew up watching Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood is nothing special. I bet just about everybody that watches this probably watched, if they watched television at all when they were growing up, they probably saw Mr. Rogers at least a couple of times if they didn't watch it every chance he was on like I did. And what's sort of special about that is that the show is having its 50th anniversary this year. It's a show that got started in 1968. I believe it was shot in black and white film. They played live music. A band on the set was playing live music in the background. And Fred Rogers is such an astounding human being who did amazing things, who was an amazing person. And you hear all these ridiculous... The one when I was in college that got talked about a lot was the idea that he was a deadly sniper in the Army, with the highest kill count of anyone that had ever served in that position, which is nonsense. He never killed anybody to my knowledge. I'm not even sure he served in the military. He was going to be a minister, or he was a minister, but he definitely went through the training and at some point decided that he could do more by being a television personality. But there's going to be a movie coming out this year with Tom Hanks, and so I don't need to talk too much about some of the stuff he did because it'll probably come up in the movie. But I remember one of the stories I heard was, and to put this in perspective, this is a young man who was a limo driver and was asked to pick him up to take him to something later that night. And the limo driver said, "Well, sir, it's an honor to meet you. You're great. My kids love you." And Mr. Rogers just said, "Oh, you have a family? Oh, that's wonderful." He said, "Yeah, no, I think the world of you. But, we need to get you down to the thing and back so I can have dinner with them tonight." And Mr. Rogers just said, "Well, why don't you take me around? Take me down to your place. Let's have dinner together. I think that sounds wonderful. I don't think you should miss dinner for me." He did. He just sat down. His family must have been the most surprised family to open the door and have Mr. Rogers. "Hi there." And he just sat down and ate and listened to them talk. And he told stories. He listened to their stories. And then he went to the place. He was a little late, but he had a story to tell. And I have to think, what I love about writing is telling stories. And when you tell a story in person, you get something that you don't normally get from writing a story. Sometimes you write a story, people read it, and they tell you it's wonderful. In my experience, you give them the story, they'll say they read it, and then they never will. But that's just me being grumpy. When you actually sit there and you tell a story and it's good, and you can connect with that person, if you can connect with anybody that you're talking to, and you can see the smile on their face, and you can see that it's genuine because you've brought them something. You've brought them to something that they weren't expecting. That feeling is addictive. And it's something that I just love. You hear people talk about, you hear actors talk about the difference between stage acting and acting on television or in film, and how there's that disconnect when you're acting in front of a camera. You'll have a whole crew telling you did a good job, but you don't feel it. But when you're in front of an audience, it's something different. You're reacting to things that they're doing. I remember when I was told that, I was thinking, how do you react to an audience? When I'm watching a play or something, I just sort of. But I do. I laugh. I frown at the parts that are meant to be frowned at. And if something's not going well, I'll just sort of look bored. But if something is going well, I'll have my eyebrows up and I'll be looking, and I'll laugh more openly, and the rest of the audience does too. I think if you can get one person to start laughing and they're not too annoying with their laughter, that helps get other people to start laughing at the same time. And if you can see other people smiling, it'll help you smile. And I remember my psych teacher saying, a smile makes you feel better. That's not nonsense. It's not just corny. It's science. When you smile, something happens in your mind and it happens to your nervous system. You can call it the release of chemicals or synapses firing or even an energy if you want. But what it is when we smile, we start to feel better, even if you're forcing the smile. So turn that frown upside down is not the worst advice you can ever hear, despite what you might think. And I can remember I was somebody that was picked on and bullied sometimes when I was very young. I was a little bit older than most of the kids that I lived with in my neighborhood. And instead of being sort of their boss, I just sort of, it was a weird thing. It sort of, maybe it limited my maturity so that I was sort of the immature kid, just so I was at the same level that they were at. And it sort of made them think I was dumb, I think. And, sometimes I feel dumb, but I recognize now that I was just sort of naive, and if anything, it was that I didn't understand the nuances of socialization at the time. But despite how I felt, or how I felt like I needed to be when I was around these kids growing up, I could always count on Mr. Rogers to make me feel better, because he would tell the most wonderful stories. And even though he was divided by a TV screen and me, I remember talking to him. When he would ask a question, I would yell out the answer, and he'd thank me, he'd smile and say, good job. So when that movie comes out this year, with Tom Hanks playing Fred Rogers, I highly recommend you go see it, because you might remember something that you lost, and you might remember that you are special. And thank you. I'm Eric Spornitz, and tomorrow will be better.